Picture this. A 20-year-old girl from Quezon City, ranked 140 in the entire world, walks into the Miami Open on a wild card that almost nobody outside the tennis world even noticed had been handed out. 2 weeks later, she has beaten a Grand Slam champion, dethroned the world's #2 player, and rewritten the record books for an entire nation that had never had a global tennis star to call its own. That's not the ending of the story. That's barely the beginning. Over the next 16 months, this same player would go on to beat the defending Wimbledon champion on center court, win her first ever WTA Tour level title by beating 3 former major champions in a single week, and turn a Canadian stadium into a sea of Philippine flags so loud it sparked a national conversation about what tennis crowds are even supposed to sound like. This is the complete story of Alex Eala's rise, from an afterthought on a draw sheet to one of the most talked about players in the sport, and by the time we are done, you'll understand exactly why every single person in tennis is watching her next move. Long before any of the headlines, there was a 5-year-old girl in the Philippines who idolized Maria Sharapova so intensely that she kept a photo of their brief meeting for the rest of her life, studying the intensity, the presentation, the sheer competitive will of a 5-time Grand Slam champion the way other kids study cartoons. Alexandra Maniego Eala turned professional in March of 2020, barely a teenager, left-handed with a two-handed backhand, training partly out of Rafael Nadal's academy in Mallorca, Spain, thousands of miles from home. Her junior career already hinted at what was coming. In 2022, she won the US Open girls singles title, becoming the first Filipino to ever win a junior Grand Slam championship, and climbed to a joint singles and doubles ranking of world #2 among juniors. It was the kind of result that gets a young player noticed, but junior success and professional success are two entirely different mountains, and for the next 2 years, Eala did what almost every young pro has to do, she ground it out. Qualifying rounds at majors in 2023 and 2024. Challenger events, the unglamorous, unphotographed years where a career is actually built, match by match, week by week, mostly out of the spotlight entirely. Then came March of 2025, and the Miami Open, and a wildcard entry that would change everything. Ranked 140 in the world, Eala was about as far from a household name as a player could be walking into a WTA 1000 event. Nobody expected what happened next. She won her opening rounds, and then, in the round of 32, she faced Madison Keys, a Grand Slam champion and a top 10 player, and beat her in straight sets, 6-4, 6-2. That alone would have been a career-defining upset. But Eala wasn't finished. In the quarterfinals, she walked onto the court against IJ Swiatek, at the time the world's #2 player and one of the most dominant forces the sport had seen in years, and beat her 2-6-2, 7-5 in straight sets. 2 top 10 scalps in the same tournament, from a player who had entered on a wild card ranked outside the top 100. She went on to reach the semifinals, becoming the first player from the Philippines in history to reach a WTA 1000 semifinal, and in doing so, broke into the world's top 100 for the very first time. It's hard to overstate how rare a run like that actually is. Players spend entire careers chasing a single win over a top 10 opponent. Eala got 2, back-to-back, in the same week, as a virtual unknown, and the tennis world took immediate notice. The rest of 2025 became a season of continuous, steady proof that Miami wasn't a fluke. She carried that momentum into the grass court season, a surface she'd only made her professional debut on the year before. After an early loss in Birmingham, she reached the quarterfinals in Ilkley, qualified into the main draw at Nottingham, and then arrived at the Eastbourne Open, where she produced one of the gutsiest runs of her young career. She survived an epic 3-set qualifying battle against Hailey Baptiste, 6-7, 7-6, 6-1, just to reach the main draw, and then proceeded to beat Lucia Bronzetti, third-seeded Yelena Ostapenko, Diana Yastremska, and Varvara Krejcikova in succession to reach her first ever WTA Tour final. She held 4 championship points in that final against Australian Maya Joint, agonizingly close to a maiden title, before eventually losing in a final set tiebreak, 6-4, 1-6, 7-6. It was a heartbreaking way to fall short, but it confirmed something important. This wasn't a one-tournament story anymore. This was a player who could go deep, consistently, against legitimate professional competition. She made her Wimbledon debut that same summer, losing in the first round to former champion Barbara Krejcikova in a tight 3-setter, another signal that even in defeat, she belonged on these courts. And then, at the US Open, she made history yet again, becoming the first Filipino player ever to win a main draw Grand Slam match in the Open era, defeating Clara Towson in the first round before advancing to the second. A month later, in September, she won her first professional title at the Guadalajara WTA 125 event, and closed out 2025 with a career-high year-end ranking of world #50, an almost unbelievable jump for a player who had started the year ranked 140 and functionally unknown outside hardcore tennis circles. If 2025 was the breakthrough, 2026 was the year Alex Eala turned that breakthrough into full-blown stardom, and it happened almost immediately. After an opening round exit at the Australian Open in January, she traveled to Dubai in February and delivered another statement result, upsetting defending champion Jasmine Paolini, at the time ranked world #6, in straight sets. She followed it by beating Alexandra Sasnovich to reach the quarterfinals, an achievement she celebrated with an emotional embrace with her parents, Mike and Alex Eala, and her coach Joan Bosch, a moment that captured just how much this journey meant to the people who had supported her from the very beginning. She fell to Coco Gauff in that quarterfinal, but the run had already made its point. Her Miami breakthrough was not a one-off. It was the new baseline. March brought another leap forward. Eala reached the fourth round at Indian Wells, and with it, a new career-high ranking of world number 29, cracking the top 30 for the first time in her life. At Miami that same spring, she played the longest match of her career, 3 hours and 20 minutes against Laura Siegemund, a grueling battle that, when asked about afterward, she described with a line that says everything about her mentality, that essentially everything she does in training exists to prepare her for exactly these kinds of physical, high-pressure battles against bigger, stronger opponents. That April, she was invited to the Laureus World Sports Awards in Madrid, standing alongside some of the biggest names in global sport, a clear sign that her rise had extended well beyond tennis media and into the wider sporting world's consciousness. Clay's season proved tougher, as it often does for players still building out every part of their game, with first-round exits at the French Open in both 2025 and 2026. But grass season is where everything came together in a way nobody could have scripted better. The 2026 grass swing began with a title in Birmingham, a second career title after Guadalajara the year before, building quiet momentum heading into the sport's most prestigious stage. And then came July 4, 2026, the third round of Wimbledon, center court, against defending champion and world number 3 IJ Swiatek, the same player Eala had upset back in Miami over a year earlier. This time, the stakes were exponentially higher, the setting exponentially bigger, and Eala delivered one of the signature wins of her career, 7-6 in a tight opening set tiebreak, 6-2 in the second, dethroning the reigning Wimbledon champion in front of a global audience. It produced one of the tournament's most unforgettable images, Eala fully extended, chasing down a seemingly unreachable ball mid-rally, a photograph that came to symbolize the fearless, all-in style of tennis that had carried her from an unranked wildcard to a legitimate top-tier threat. She advanced all the way to the fourth round, the best Grand Slam result of her career, and less than 2 weeks later, on July 13, her ranking climbed to world number 28, making her the highest-ranked player in Philippine tennis history and the first Filipino to ever break into the world's top 30. Along the way, the tennis world's biggest names started publicly acknowledging what they were watching unfold. Billie Jean King, the Hall of Fame legend whose 1973 Battle of the Sexes victory remains one of the defining moments in sports history, spent time with Eala after the Swiatek win and called her an inspiration to kids across the Philippines and well beyond it. And underneath the celebratory post, a name Eala had idolized since she was 5 years old left a simple, 2-word comment, Maria Sharapova, writing a star, a moment that meant more to Eala than perhaps any other piece of recognition she'd received in her career, given who it came from. The momentum kept building through the rest of the summer's North American hard-court swing, and it built toward the single biggest achievement of her career so far. At the Mubadala City DC Open in Washington in early August, Eala went on an absolute tear, defeating a string of major names on her way to the final, where she faced tournament top seed Jessica Pegula. In a final delayed a full day by rain, Eala needed 3 sets to get it done, 4-6, 6-4, 6-love, but when the last point landed, she had won her first ever WTA Tour-level singles title, a distinctly bigger milestone than her earlier WTA 125 titles, and one that instantly vaulted her into the world's top 20 for the first time in her career. She arrived at the National Bank Open in Toronto having won 10 of her last 11 matches dating back to that Wimbledon fourth-round run, and Toronto became, in its own way, the loudest chapter of the entire story. Sobe Stadium transformed into a sea of Philippine flags the moment her opening match was confirmed, with roughly 3,100 tickets sold specifically off the strength of her name alone. She beat Alicia Parks in 3 sets, survived a brutal, nearly 3-hour battle against Katie McNally through an ankle scare, and advanced to the round of 16 still riding that incredible 10-of-11 stretch, before running into Belinda Bencic, a former world number 4 and Olympic champion in the middle of her own remarkable comeback from motherhood. Eala battled hard in a tight opening set before Bencic's experience took over, closing out the match 6-4, 6-love. It was a tough, lopsided loss on paper, but by that point in the story, it was clear this wasn't a setback that would define her. It was simply the next data point in a career that had already rewritten what anyone thought was possible for tennis in the Philippines. So what does all of this actually add up to? A player who was ranked 140 and functionally anonymous in March of 2025 sits, 16 months later, inside the world's top 20, carrying a maiden WTA Tour title, a win over a reigning Wimbledon champion, victories over multiple Grand Slam winners and Olympic medalists, and a fanbase so passionate it can sell out sections of a Canadian stadium purely off the announcement of a single match. Off the court, that rise has translated into an endorsement portfolio that started at age 8 with a deal with Globe and has since grown to include Babolat, Nike, the Bank of the Philippine Islands, and, as of 2026, an ambassadorship with Milo, alongside magazine features in Vogue Philippines and Tetla Philippines that reflect the crossover appeal most tennis players never achieve. And this is very likely still just the opening chapters. With her sights set on the Asian swing later this year, potential WTA 1000 appearances at events like Wuhan and the China Open, and a genuine shot at qualifying for the season-ending WTA finals if her US Open run goes well, the story of Alex Eala isn't building towards some distant, hypothetical peak. It's happening right now, in real time, one tournament at a time, and every single result along the way keeps confirming the same thing: this isn't a hot streak. This is a genuine generational talent who just happens to be getting better, faster, than almost anyone saw coming, and the entire tennis world, this channel very much included, is going to be watching every single step of what comes next.